World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Ukrainian officials say the death toll from Russian missile and drone strikes on Kyiv has now risen to 6 after another body was recovered. Authorities warn rescue work is ongoing and the number could still climb. China's defense ministry says Japan would face a crushing defeat if it used force over Taiwan after PM Takaichi said a Chinese attack could trigger a military response. Beijing says her comments have sparked a serious diplomatic row. Gaza officials say Israel has handed over 15 Palestinian bodies a day after Hamas returned a 73-year-old hostage remains. Authorities are identifying the remains as these exchanges continue. ASEAN observers will investigate a landmine blast on the Thai-Cambodian border that has jeopardized a US-brokered truce. Thailand accuses Cambodia of planting new PMN2 mines and has suspended the ceasefire. Beijing firmly opposes the US approval of a $330 million arms sale to Taiwan, calling it a breach of the One China principle. The Foreign Ministry says the deal must be cancelled immediately. The UN Rights Council has opened a special session on Sudan to consider a fact-finding mission into El Fasher killings. Humanitarian chief Volker Turk calls the bloodshed a stain on the world as evidence is gathered for possible ICC action. Two crude bombs exploded near Dhaka airport days before the verdict in ousted PM Sheikh Hasina's war crimes trial. Hasina is being tried in absentia for a 2024 crackdown and remains in India after last year's ouster. Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan says an inquiry will investigate fatalities that occurred during the election that returned her to power. She told Parliament she is deeply saddened and offered condolences to the families of those killed. Okay, we start this hour in Europe, and Russia stated that it is still open to holding a summit with the United States in Budapest, provided the meeting is well prepared and based on agreements made during the previous summit between Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova confirmed that contacts between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio would continue if necessary. The planned summit, initially announced last month, was cancelled by Trump shortly afterwards, who cited concerns over it being a waste of time. Russia's readiness for the summit remains contingent on constructive preparations. Okay, now joining us is Marian Juris, a European affairs expert joining us live from Brussels. Thank you very much for joining us, Marian, here on the programme. Moscow says that in order for Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin to meet in Budapest, this meeting must be well prepared. What exactly does Russia want the US to guarantee before Putin sits down with him again?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, and it's a great question. Of course, there were some expectations already during the meeting on Alaska, but I think there was some disruption, maybe not from Russian side or American side, but from third actor who want to disrupt these negotiations. But to the topic, Budapest could become a great hope for peace as a venue for possible negotiations between the US and Russia. Budapest is also appropriate because of the government stance on the conflict. But I would like to add a remarkable aspect here regarding the mood in Central Europe. For example, Polish President Karol Nawrocki, I would like to see, he said, I would like to see an equal partnership, not just benefits for the Kyiv authorities. They are harming our farmers by importing grain and are also quite ungrateful. In case of Hungarian PM, Viktor Orbán, he said, we feed them, so let them not behave like a sovereign country. We are not enemies, but we do not owe them anything. And there is, for example, new government in Czech Republic. So we see of Europe, we see the clear contrast between Central Europe and other parts of Europe, including the Brussels institutions. And certainly many of us would welcome if there are others joined the efforts of Donald Trump, Viktor Orbán and others, so that it does not affect the civilians of all those involved, including indirect actors in the conflict.
Yeah, of course, and President Trump cancelled the previous meeting that was supposed to be scheduled in Budapest and cited it being a waste of time. What went wrong there, and what does Donald Trump want in order to possibly be open to another one?
In this case, I would say that there were some talks between a lower level of diplomacy, and it was not very fruitful, and they were not agreed on some main points of possible talk between the presidents. So I would say that maybe in this time it was too hurry, it was too early to negotiate and set some term of meeting. Maybe after some weeks, after some 1 month, 2 months, there will be more to speak about. So I would expect this kind of meeting maybe in the beginning of the next year.
Okay, Marian, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of Europe coming up next. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that his country has no intention of attacking NATO member states, but warned that Russia will use all means available in case of NATO aggression against Russia. This comes in response to comments made by Estonia's Prime Minister Kristen Michal in Tallinn, where he said that the defense of the eastern flank must remain a clear priority to the NATO alliance and the European Union to secure Europe from Russian aggression. Estonia has pledged to raise its defence spending significantly, exceeding the NATO 2% GDP target and aiming for 5.4% of GDP over the next 4 years to meet new NATO force capability goals. Let's listen in to what the Estonian Prime Minister said.
Me peame töötama edasi selle nimel, et idatiiva kaitse oleks NATO ja Euroopa Liidu selge prioriteet. Mõlema riigi kaitsekulud kasvavad kohe üle 5%. Eestis areneb kaitsetööstus kõige kiiremini. Meil on häid võimalusi koostööks kaitsetööstuse valdkonnas. Ja kolmandaks, me teeme seda kõike Euroopa turvalise tuleviku.
Okay, Marian joins us once again. Of course, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has reiterated his statements that Russia has no intention of attacking any NATO states. But how does Moscow expect Europe and NATO to trust this statement when Russian missiles and drones frequently land near NATO borders? And of course, we have also seen drone incursions into the countries and like Estonia and Poland as well.
Yeah, on this level of diplomacy or international relations, we do not need to talk about some big trust. But of course, we just need to see what's happening on Ukraine, how our advancement of the forces, how many years we already spent in this conflict. So maybe we have an answer in this case. I certainly understand the need of some politicians to talk about defense, armaments, increased spending. It is very popular talk in Europe today. There are various concepts on the table about military mobility, about spending on dual-use infrastructure, about increasing readiness or programs like Rearm Europe. But I'm now wondering a little bit how you want to sell it to people, working people and families who have had their energy prices increase in recent years due to disconnection from Russian energy and high transit fees. through other flows. Food prices in stores have increased, prices of services have increased, taxes in addition, various green taxes, of course, are being invented, etc. So how do they want to sell it to the people who already have significant problems that you have to pay and become even more frugal? And people are asking, of course, for whom? For Ukraine because of NATO, because of Ursula von der Leyen, or who? So of course there may be some rational arguments that everyone can understand if there is real threat,
Yes.
if there is a real need. But in today's mood of citizens in some countries, I can very well imagine that they will simply not accept it. And those politicians who will take this approach or steps within shaky budgets will pay a probably heavy political price.
Yes, and Marian, of course, Estonia argues its defence spending surge to 5.4% of its GDP is a direct response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is Estonia overreacting here?
I don't know if they adopted this plan about 4 or 5%. Personally, them, if it's their opinion or it's more acceptation of proposal or demanding from American President Donald Trump, who said that Europe should take more burden from this for its own defense. So maybe we can think about if it's the first scenario or it's finally the meaning or opinion of Atlantic partners of Estonia.
Okay, Marian, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of Europe. And on the ground in Kyiv, the death toll from the recent Russian missile and drone strikes has now risen to 6, with rescue teams recovering another body from the rubble. Ukrainian officials confirm that the additional victim was found in a damaged house in Kyiv. The mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, and the city administration head, Timur Tykhenchenko, have expressed their condolences and announced that the number of injured has also increased to 35. The attack on the capital occurred overnight, causing widespread devastation throughout. Let's take a listen in.
На мене загорілося волосся, я почала його тушити. Потім я включаю ліхтарик і шукаю собаку. Собака з переляку трошки відскочила, видно, от сюди під ікони стала. І там осталась. Я беру собаку, потім повертаюся, стіни нема, двері вирвала вхідну, полум'я йде, сусіди кричать.
Рятувальники від дощу продовжують ліквідовувати наслідки масштабного комбінованого обстрілу саме столиці. Столиця була атакована і дронами, і балістичними, і крилатими ракетами. В цілому рятувальники були залучені більш ніж на 25 локаціях по місту Києву. Станом на зараз працюємо лише на одній, саме тут в Деснянському районі міста Києва, де ви бачите, внаслідок влучання ворожого шахеду сталося часткове руйнування перекриттів між 8 та 4 поверхами. Попередньо це був ударний.
Now, on the other hand, Russia claims to have successfully downed 5 Ukrainian drones or UAVs as part of its ongoing defense efforts. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that 4 UAVs were destroyed over Belgorod near the Ukrainian border and 1 over the Rostov region. Marian joins us once again with 6 civilians dead and 35 injured in Kyiv alone today. What does this strike tell us about Russia's current strategy? Is it shifting back to targeting population centers?
Yeah, today drone and missile strike is yet another reminder of the ongoing suffering inflicted on civilians. Also, it's very sad to see and hear about, with dozens of drones and missiles reportedly used across multiple districts. The attacks caused fires, damage to homes and critical infrastructure. Then several people, as you said, were killed and many more were wounded. Meanwhile, Ukraine stepped up its attacks on Russian oil infrastructure with drone strikes on one of its biggest export terminals in Novorossiysk on the Black Sea coast. Fire broke at the Sheshkari oil refinery and ship and block and of flats were hit, officials said. So yes, these news are really sad, and it come to us every day, and maybe it's another reminder why people in power, why people in power and who are responsible for these things should sit behind the table and discuss with the other side.
Indeed. Marian, do stay with us once again. We have further updates. Now, the head of Russia's Rosatom, the state nuclear cooperation, confirmed that approximately 8 drones were directed towards the Novorossiysk nuclear plant and damaged the main switchgear. This led to the disconnection of 3 units, reducing plant capacity to less than 50%. The head of Rosatom, Alexei Likachev, stated that while the drones were shot down, some debris caused significant disruption. However, repair efforts were swift and the plant was restored to its full design capacity. Meanwhile, Rosatom was also reassured that the Zaporozhye nuclear plant remains stable, with plans to secure operational licenses for its units by 2025. Let's listen in to the Director General of Rosatom.
Позапрошлой ночью где-то около 8 дронов были направлены, здесь нет никаких сомнений, в сторону Новоогарежской атомной электростанции. Все они были обезврежены, сбиты, однако ряд обломков упал и повредил общие в целях профилактики возможных инцидентов. 3 блока станции, включая две наших гордости, 6-й, 7-й Нововоронеж, 1-й 1200-ники, были отключены от сети и ушли на мощность менее 50.
Marian Jurish joins us once again to discuss this. Marian, Russia now confirms that 8 drones struck near the switchgear of this nuclear plant. Does this incident prove that Russia's nuclear infrastructure is far more vulnerable than Moscow claims?
We see the situation at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant is worrying when we see conflict runs around. Russia seized this plant in early 22. It has been operating under their own staff, many of whom are allegedly employers of Rosatom, but it's hard to verify. The plant has repeatedly lost its external power lines due to military activity, most recently a few days or weeks ago, which cut off its last major external connection. Without stable grid connection, the facility now relies on diesel generators to keep its reactors and spend fuel safely cooled. The European External Action Service has called the situation unsustainable, warning that a prolonged blackout could compromise critical safety systems. In this context, it is not surprising that Rosatom is pushing to obtain licenses to repair or even restart parts of the plant. On top of that, the takeover of Zaporozhye gives Russia a powerful lever. The plant is increasingly treated not just as an energy asset, but as a geopolitical tool.
Yes, and Marian, 3 nuclear units were knocked offline, capacity below 50% there. Doesn't this show a dangerous failure in Russian nuclear security?
Yeah, we will see what will happen, because these declarations sometimes are very contradicting. It's about we see or we hear when listen Russian declarations how everything is okay. Okay, we saw or heard some assurances from International Atomic Energy Organization, which was quite in line with this Russian statements. But on the other side, there were some other statements which was in contradicting. So it's very shaky and chaotic situation, and it's really how I said before, it's very hard to verify all of these statements if it's from one side or other side, or some institutions which are official and should be independent. So we will see what will happen next.
Yes, Marian Jurish, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. We now move on over and move to a different update. The European Union foreign ministers will discuss a proposal next week for the EU to take the lead in training 3,000 Palestinian police officers with the aim of deploying them in Gaza. According to reports, the proposal is part of the EU's broader support for the implementation of a 20-point plan for Gaza, initially proposed by US President Donald Trump. The first phase of the plan was agreed upon by Israel and Hamas in October, though its full implementation remains uncertain. The EU's police mission could provide direct training and support to Palestinian police officers, with a longer-term goal of training the full 13,000-strong force. These reports come as Gaza's Nasser hospital reported receiving 15 Palestinian bodies from Israel as part of a broader prisoner exchange agreement. Let's listen in to the head of the Health Ministry Committee, who is in charge of retrieving these bodies.
قد تسلمنا اليوم من الصليب الأحمر من الجانب الإسرائيلي عبر الصليب الأحمر أو اللجنة الدولية للصليب الأحمر 15 جثمانا، يصبح عدد الجثامين التي وصلت إلينا من الجانب الإسرائيلي 330 جثمان حتى هذه اللحظة، وهي الآن في حالة الفحص 15 جثمان، أي أقصد في حالة الفحص والتصوير واستخلاص الأدلة. تم التعرف على 95 جثمان وتسليمها إلى ذويها من هؤلاء الجثامين. يعني حتى هذه اللحظة بقية الجثامين ما زالت في طور الانتظار لحين التعرف عليهم من ذويهم.
Okay, joining us now is Sol Sadka, a security analyst and author, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Sol, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. The European Union wants to train 3,000 Palestinian officers for Gaza. Is Israel comfortable with an EU-trained Palestinian force operating in an area, of course, which Israel still considers a very high threat security zone?
The future of Gaza remains up in the air. Someone is going to have to police those areas, and no one will be doing it apart from Palestinians themselves, based on what we've seen in the past. So I can't imagine that Israel would object to the EU training of these 3,000 policemen. My assumption is they'll be lightly armed, and they will be rolled into activity in a process that will take years. So I doubt that Israel would object, at least in theory.
And
We
Israel...
have a precedent for this in the West Bank for decades, which is somewhat successful at keeping the peace in the West Bank.
Israel has repeatedly, of course, said policing in Gaza must prevent Hamas from re-emerging as a governing force. How can the EU guarantee that these officers won't later deflect, for example, or fall under Hamas influence?
There can be no guarantees of anything in the Middle East, that's for sure. It'll be a constant process of observation and maintaining a deterrence and ensuring that they are sufficiently monitored by the IDF to the extent that they will not be able to become tools of Hamas again. Right now, about 45% of Gaza and almost the entire remaining population is under the control of Hamas as it is. This is no longer too much of an Israeli problem. The Israelis are quite happy with them being behind that buffer zone. And whoever polices that area is a Gazan people problem. What these police forces will hopefully be doing is patrolling areas that have been entirely cleared of Hamas and Hamas weapons, which will allow, theoretically at least, a new dawn to emerge for the Gazan people. The main goal here is to separate the Gazans from Hamas, since the Gazans are their only real weapon.
Yeah, and so finally, apologies, we're running out of time a little bit. Gaza's Nasser hospital, of course, big update today. It says 15 bodies were transferred under this recent ceasefire agreement. What are your thoughts on how the exchange is going in that regard? And what's the feeling in Israel about the current speed of the process?
The exchange is almost miraculous. It's taken about a month, but it has got done. And I don't really think anyone expected it to have got done at all. And 2 years ago, I know the people that I was speaking to were all saying that the assumption was that the hostage situation would never be entirely resolved. And we've gone from having 251 hostages in Gaza to 3, of which we know they're unfortunately deceased. There are 3 bodies maintained by Hamas as collateral, and I'm sure they'll be handed over soon enough. It's a miracle that this happened. It's unbelievable. No one here can believe it.
Yeah.
As good a result as any Israeli could have possibly expected, and far exceeded my own expectations.
Yeah, Sol Sadka, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. A pleasure to have you, of course, on the programme. We move on and we approach our final story this hour. And the UN Human Rights Council has held a special session on the situation in Sudan's El Fasher, in which states are considering a request for a fact-finding mission on reported mass killings as the city in Darfur has failed to the paramilitary forces. The fact-finding mission included in a draft resolution also seek to identify the perpetrators of violations allegedly committed by the Rapid Support Forces and their allies in El Fasher. The fall of El Fasher to the RSF on the 26th of October cemented its control of the Darfur region in more than 2 years of civil war with the Sudanese army. The RSF has denied targeting civilians or blocking aid, saying such activities are due to rogue actors. Ambassador Hassan Hamid Hassan has said that Sudan had been ringing the alarm bells at every opportunity to call for pressure on the RSF and the United Arab Emirates, which he said was supporting the RSF with military equipment. Sudan's army has accused the UAE of supplying the RSF with weapons, a claim which UN experts, US lawmakers have found credible. Here's what Ambassador Hamid Hassan has said at the UN session.
إن الذي يجري في السودان هو حرب وجودية تستهدف إبادة مكونات بعينها وإحلالها بمكونات بديلة، ليس سوى ذلك ولا أقل من ذلك. وقد شاهدتم كيف أن القتل في الفاشر تم ويتم على أساس العرق بل واللون لمجموعات سكانية محددة. فما هي الإبادة الجماعية إن لم تكن تلك هي؟
Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.